Welcome to Carrickfergus Vineyard, a place of hope where lives are changing. We're a church in the heart of Carrickfergus, passionate about seeing people's lives changed by the love of Jesus. The following message was given at one of our Sunday services.
Good morning, everybody. Woo! Here we are again. I'll just let everyone get settled for a second and sort of return to that nice sort of place that we were all in during the worship, which was really unbelievable. It was such a moving time and a really comfortable feeling, just really settled here. And that's the Holy Spirit. And I just really want to keep that feeling, that sense of God's presence among us. So thanks again for having me. My name's Geoff Magill. If you don't know me, I've been coming to the church for a really, really long time. I think maybe 10 years, and always shakes her head. Probably more than that, along with my lovely wife, Leighton. We're probably best known as the two who help with kids ministry. We kind of lead the kids ministry here and support ours. We're the lead volunteers who coordinate gems and rockets. So you'll see us around, and if you have kids, you'll probably know us more a little bit, I think. I'm kind of delaying starting this morning because we are going to be covering Mark 13, the destruction of the temple and signs of the end times. So thank you, Paul and Chantel, for passing on that singular joy to me. I will get started. It will be very, very, very easy to get into the weeds on this one today. I do take this stuff really seriously, actually, and I think that'll feed into what you're going to hear this morning, I guess, because I'm probably not going to try and exegete this. I don't think that's possible, to be honest. I've thought about these types of things in various churches, like probably a lot of people have, over the years growing up, and potentially years, and I'm not really sure how you'll take this. So I'm kind of just going to ask for a bit of grace, I think, this morning, just in terms of what I'm going to say. And you'll probably work out why that is as we go along. So I guess I'll make a start. Can't delay it any longer. So we're going to be looking at, as I say, Mark 13. This is sometimes called the Olivet Discourse because it was a talk that was given on the Mount of Olives. Jesus had been to the temple. He had cursed the fig tree. He had overturned the tables. He was leaving. At the end of the day, it was getting quite dark, and they were heading away from the city. So this happened. You can read all about this in Mark 13. Mark 13 is quite succinct. It's quite a sort of here's what happened kind of thing. There are similar events that are actually also recorded in Matthew, chapters 24 and 25. Matthew's more my kind of guy. He likes to talk in stories. He really gives you more detail, and he gives you more detail about kind of what happened next and how Jesus kind of elaborated by way of example. That's kind of like what I will do. And then there's also a version of this in Luke 21, which aligns a little bit more with the version in Mark. So I think we should just start reading it. We're actually going to read all of it, which you'll be really glad to know. But don't worry, I'm a good reader. So the destruction of the temple and the signs of the end times. And it starts at verse 13. As Jesus was leaving the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings?" Jesus replied, "Not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign that they are about to be fulfilled?" Jesus said to them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and he will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines. These are the beginning of birth pains. You must be on your guard. You will be handed over to local councils and flogged in the synagogues. On account of me, you will stand before governors and kings as witnesses to them. And the gospel must first be preached to all nations. Whenever you're arrested and brought to trial, do not worry beforehand about what to say. Just say whatever is given to you at the time, for it is not you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one in the housetop go down or enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those days of distress, unequaled from the beginning when God created the world until now, are never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or look, there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. But in those days, following that distress, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and the leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The day and hour unknown. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angel in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard. Be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It is like a man going away, leaves his house, and he puts his servants in charge, each with their assigned task, and tells the one at the door to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. All right. Self-explanatory. So I'm sure we've all been to a lot of, fire and brimstone sort of services where, it's like you don't know the day or the hour. You need to be on your guard. Jesus could come back at any moment. Get right with God. Make sure you get saved. This is right. Okay. This is a prophecy about the end times, essentially, that Jesus gave his disciples. Now, he gave it shortly after he came to Jerusalem, right? And what I want to kind of give what this message is going to be about today, I think, is that everything in this is connected. There is a plan. And I feel like I need to share that today, that there is a plan here. He finally allowed his people at that particular moment to proclaim him as the Messiah. Before that, it was not yet. But as he rode into Jerusalem on the donkey, that was the first moment where he allowed the people to proclaim him as Messiah. And I'm mentioning this very seemingly tangential point specifically because I might come back to it later if you're still with me. That's because there's so much in this chapter, as you've just heard. I'm not 100% sure about my ability to do justice to it. To be honest, it is very, very deep, and I'm really not sure anyone is qualified to preach on this kind of thing. I genuinely think this is the kind of thing you do in your home group. You have a chat and you discuss, but you don't get bogged, you don't get into the weeds. I genuinely believe that. What I hope to be able to set out without boring everybody to death is, because it can get very technical, but there is a powerful message for us in these verses that it does make me excited to get into you with this morning. But as I say, if I could just ask for a little bit of grace, some people might be disappointed if I get very allegorical, and some people who are really into prophecy and end time stuff might think I've just kind of copped out of this. There was a time when I was rather more sure about all this end time stuff, actually. But that, I feel, is a common trap. What is it, the phrase they say, I wish I was young enough again to know everything. And I think that's definitely true for a lot of Christians. When we're young, we think we know, we've got it all kind of made. We know, we understand it all. But I've spent years studying this stuff. I used to go to prophecy classes like every other Tuesday and look at Revelation and like intense detail, predict blood moons and all sorts of weird stuff. So like I do know what I'm talking about here, but the more I find out, the less I know. Essentially, it's like Socrates' paradox of wisdom. He said, that was like a phrase he used, the more I find out, the less I know. So I always advise people to preach and humbly. I think it's really important to preach humbly. James chapter 3, verse 1 says, not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more harshly. I always think about that when I'm up here. I always think it's really important to remember that. Because I genuinely think that this kind of stuff we have to be very, very careful with. So this will be a wee bit more like my free-form jazz sessions rather than anything too structured, I guess, because this is a message that I want you to feel more than to intellectualize, if that makes sense. It's important to understand also that the Bible, when you're doing prophecy stuff, the Bible has an internal dialogue with itself. The only way you can understand certain elements of the Bible or a passage that you're reading is if you have basically an understanding of the whole thing, because it constantly refers to itself. It constantly has a dialogue with itself. I say this not to discourage you, but to help you see that difficult sections in the Bible can become clear when you understand the correct context in which it was presented and other parts of the Bible that it references. So if you want to be serious about this stuff, like join a home group and get a good concordance. And most importantly, pray. Pray long and hard and seek God and seek His Spirit and ask God for wisdom, and never ever fool yourself into believing that you've cracked it. That's not to say that God won't give you insight, and He will give you insight for special times and places, and you should pray for insight. I use an app, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, it's called the Blue Letter Bible. It's a great wee app, it's totally free, and it's like an online concordance, and it provides all that cross-referencing to other verses, other parts of the Bible. It's called the Blue Letter Bible, I think, because it was actually launched back in the mid-90s, and it has, at a time when all those hyperlinks that you found on web pages were all blue. They had these blue hyperlinks, and the site used hundreds of thousands of blue hyperlinks, and they were literally study resources for almost every word in the Bible. So it's like a play on the red letter Bible, the red letter words of Jesus, but they've jokingly called it the Blue Letter Bible because there's so many hyperlinks, all these blue hyperlinks, which is the essential focus of the whole of Scripture. If you know it, it all points to Jesus. So the Bible refers to itself. Interestingly, did you know that by way of example of this, the book of Revelation has 404 verses in it, and it contains over 800 allusions to the Old Testament. So if you think about that, on average, every verse in Revelation has 2 allusions to somewhere else in the Bible. If you read that on its own, it would be like trying to understand a complex book while missing 90% of the pages of it. So what I'm basically saying is we're already into the weeds. So to summarize so far, get a good concordance, get a Blue Letter Bible app. Don't expect this talk to be in any way coherent. And remember that Mark 13 should not be read in isolation. So that's by way of intro. Next thing I want to ask is, do you feel like we're living in the end times? Yes. Yeah. I think most of us, or a lot of us kind of feel like that. And that's not taking into consideration the 40 days and nights of rain that we had at the start of the year. Like, it felt like the end times. It was absolutely miserable. It just somehow feels bleak when you look out at the world, doesn't it? Now, I have loads of examples of this, just to make you feel very, very miserable and also a little bit scared. There's a lot of reasons to feel that we're living in the end times. And I have unfortunately fallen down the rabbit hole of doing a lot of reading. Like if you look at the Middle East, even just at the minute, Iran, like literally just this weekend, Gaza, if you look at that, if you look at what's going on in Israel, if you look at the sheer numbers of movies, TV shows, books, games, all about pandemics, climate collapse, dystopian futures, it just seems culturally even like we're expecting it, doesn't it? It just feels culturally we're expecting it. Nuclear threat, artificial intelligence. Have you ever heard about the doomsday clock? Have you heard of the doomsday clock? It was actually started by the scientists who were involved in the Manhattan Project. If you've seen Oppenheimer, you know what that is. You know what that is. So back in 1945, after they bombed, was it Hiroshima and Nagasaki? These atomic scientists started this thing called the doomsday clock, and it's now continuously maintained by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and it indicates how close humanity is to destroying the world by its own technologies. So as of January there, just this year, it is set currently at 85 seconds to midnight, midnight being doomsday, representing the closest it has ever been to global catastrophe due to nuclear threats, climate change, and AI. But I would say, like, we need to be careful. End times talk is just one of the ways that human beings process uncertainty, process fear. We always think we're living in the last days. We might be. But it's no wonder that it feels like the end, because at this point in time, there's a lot of uncertainty and fear in the world, caused by societal instability, economic uncertainty, political conflict, global inequalities. They all feed into this fear. For me, it's particularly worrying, actually, and this is the thing that I fear most, is this intrinsic, the kind of taken for granted certainty that human life has value in its own right, is as made in the image of God, is gradually being eroded. Do you ever feel like that's the case? I just feel there's so many signs of it. It just feels wrong that you can't see your doctor anymore. It just feels wrong that you can sit for 12 hours in A&E. It's almost like there's this new cultural shift towards, if you're not contributing, you're a drain. And governments are not prepared to invest too much in you. It's this move away, I think, from the inherent sanctity of human life that's creeping into everything: culture, politics, AI. That's what I worry about. That this worldview that we take for granted, that we all share, is being slowly kind of like chipped away at. Do you ever debate, this is stupid, like this is really stupid. Do you ever debate with GPT?
No.
It's really good fun, but I regularly do it, actually. I regularly engage in long debates with it. I know it sounds really stupid. I was arguing with it the other day about what the highest purpose of, I hate saying these things because it makes me seem like a total weirdo, about what the highest purpose of humanity is. We got into a very deep discussion about consciousness, what it is, whether it's emergent or whether it's fundamental. And do you know what it literally asked me in the course of this debate? This is a ChatGPT asking me this, so I'll just quote it directly. And this is what it said. Now I'll ask you a sharper intellectual question. If tomorrow we built super intelligent systems that solved physics, ended disease, optimized the planet, but eliminated conscious beings in the process, would that be progress? That's what it asked me. We are literally philosophizing now about the value of human worth. This is the subtle cultural shift I think we are experiencing now. There is a brilliant book. I'm going to recommend a load of books, actually, which you'll not be surprised about. They're all secular books, and I don't make an apology for that. We need to listen to the thinkers that are out there at the minute. It's really important to not just only read Christian books, although we should be doing that, but we need to listen to the thinkers. This brilliant book, a lot of you will have read. It's called Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. Lots of you will have read this. He basically says our insatiable drive towards being like God will create a terrible future. He predicts a future elite class of super wealthy people, a super wealthy elite class of wealthy individuals who will, through the use of new biotechnologies, will upgrade themselves and create a new biological caste system. And he concludes, humans may lose their central role in history. Intelligent algorithms will outperform humans in most tasks. Authority may shift from individual human experience to data-driven systems, and humans may become economically useless. The decision we make now about technology, AI, bioengineering, will determine whether humans remain relevant or are surpassed by their own creations. He is ultimately asking, if intelligence becomes detached from consciousness, what will be the value of the human experience? This is what we're in now. This is the world we live in. If algorithms understand us better than we know ourselves, who should be making the decisions? I watched a 2-hour podcast the other day from Stephen Bartlett, and you know him from The Diary of a CEO. He had a physicist on, Eric Weinstein, and the title of the podcast was, You're Watching the End of the World in Real Time. Or the next one, from an AI expert that he had on, says we have 2 years maximum to stop this. 2 years. Meanwhile, we have cultural shift all over the world, the rise of new superpowers, political leaders who make no excuse for exploiting the world through trade deals to make the rich richer and the poor powerless. What about climate change? I'm also going to recommend a small book by Naomi Klein called Hot Money, and in it she says that global financial markets and corporate interests drive political and economic instability by rapidly moving capital across borders in pursuit of short-term profit, often at the expense of democracy and vulnerable economies. Financial crises that we experience, she says, are not accidental. They're frequently tied to systems designed to benefit powerful corporations and investors. Ordinary people suffer because governments are vulnerable to being sued if profit is restricted. So financial regulators in countries have to take more extreme measures like austerity, high interest rates, and deregulation to appease the financial system and investors. People are literally suffering all over this world right now because of greed. This spirit of the age is defiantly anti-Christ. And if you're looking for anti-Christ, you literally see it in the spirit of this age. I'll tell you another brilliant book that I'm reading. It's called Goliath's Curse by Luke Kemp. And he says that the very features that make up large-scale civilizations, powerful, size, complexity, interconnection, all that stuff, and energy intensity also make them fragile and prone to collapse. And he compares large civilizations to Goliaths and says that throughout history, from Babylon to Persia, ancient Egypt, Roman China, it was increasingly inequality and constant traces of power in the few that hollowed out all these Goliaths before an external shock eventually brought them crashing down. But now he says that we're living in a single global Goliath. Growth-obsessed, extractive institutions like the fossil fuel industry, big tech, and military industrial complexes rule our world and produce new ways of annihilating our species. From climate change to nuclear war, our systems are now so fast and interconnected that a future collapse will likely be global, likely to be swift, and likely to be irreversible. And he says the only way to avoid this risk is to return to some kind of humanity, some kind of respect for each other. So there is a lot of fear out there, a lot of things going on that give us cause to be frightened. It feels like we're racing to towards some kind of denouement, like it can't just continue this way. And that's probably why everyone here, or the people who said yes, feel like we probably are living in the end times. Mark 13 says, there are a lot of signs of the end times. gives us some signs. But the challenge of reading end times prophecy is a really big one. No one really knows what it all means for sure. So we can't really get into that, can we? Verse 2 says that every stone in the temple will be thrown down, not one will be left on another. And this literally did happen. In AD 70, when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman armies, historians actually recorded the attack was slightly delayed. The city was isolated for a long time and supply lines were cut for a long time, but internal power struggles in Rome after Nero's suicide delayed the attack. So it's actually recorded that Christians recognized those signs and left before the attack happened. And the attack finally took place during Passover. It could have happened during the winter, but potentially due to those delays and Jesus' call for people to pray, it did get delayed. So if that's the story then, if that's what we've just read is about, why are we talking about the end times? There's this sort of perennial debate amongst Christians about these verses. These verses are really complicated. There's numerous points of controversy. Like, was it just fulfilled there in AD 70? Was that it? Or is this about a future end times tribulation, or is it both? Verse 30 says, "Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have happened." What is this generation? Is this Jesus' contemporaries, a future generation at the end, the Jewish race generally? There's a lot of debate about that. I'm not going to try to tell you what to believe. What is the abomination of desolation mentioned in verse 14? It is when Titus entered the Holy of Holies in AD 70, or is it a future Antichrist figure? And how does it echo the book of Daniel? What is the nature of the coming Son of Man? Is this symbolic or literal? Will the church be raptured before the tribulation, after the tribulation, during the tribulation? Is this prophecy specifically about Israel or the whole church or the whole world? These verses are quite opaque, and I think there's probably a good reason for that. There is a suggestion also that the Luke account could be some people argue it's for a different audience because the chronology is different in the Luke account. The Matthew account lines up a little bit more. Verses 24 and 25 lines up a bit more. But Jesus specifically mentions the abomination of desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel. So what he's doing is he's leading us back to the Old Testament. Got it. Verses 24 and 25 in the Mark account, we also read references to the Old Testament as well. He talks about how the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. This all comes from Isaiah. And these are both judgments on Israel. So it gets very interesting. Daniel 9 prophecy is said to contain a very specific prophecy about the time Israel has to recognize its Messiah. And these are all signs and signals that Jesus has put into this little talk that he's gave to tell you to go back and read the Bible, to understand it more. And I think that's really important for us. So I think it's time for the church to lead the way again. I think it's time for us to stand up a bit more, be noticed in society. In the book, there's a book called Millennium. It's one of my favorite books by Tom Holland. And he explains that 1,000 years ago, people genuinely believed that they were living at the threshold of the end of the world. Many people believed that Christ was going to appear and that history would reach its final consummation. When nothing happened, people gradually moved towards reform and renewal, and slowly this led to a more just and fair and more civilized society. Monasteries came about, and religious practices and churches, and the belief in the sanctity of human life, which has definitely shaped our culture for the last 1,000 years. There's a reason why Jesus told us in verse 32, I think, that no one knows the time or the day that the end will occur, only the Father. And yet people have been obsessed with this for the last 2,000 years. Every generation has a fair number of people that believe that theirs is actually the end times, and we are no different. The problem is it takes away our responsibility. It takes away our responsibility to deal with the problems that we have created. And many of the things happening in the world today are creations that we have made. Is God going to swoop down and rescue us? We're in an historical moment that has occurred so many times in the past, and maybe will occur in the future, who knows. Jesus says to us to watch And in these Matthew accounts, he goes further. He tells us to use our talents. He tells us to be on our guard. And he tells us very specifically to look out for the least of these. And I think the Matthew account actually does give us a little bit more insight. That's why we probably have to read everything. It's like really important that we stop looking up so much and look down at the people that we see around us. We're part of communities. We carry a light, we carry a love, and we carry a hope. That's what we should be sharing. Because God, if anything we know from all of this, is God has a plan. God is in the middle of this. And Jesus is doing something in this story. He's walking towards his crucifixion. And that's what we need to remember, that Jesus has laid down his life for us in the middle of this. There is a plan. Read all those cross references if you want. Find out what that plan looks like. I had it all written down here. Come and ask me about it. But this plan is to be trusted, and it'll give us hope. And I just hope that if you haven't really thought about your relationship with Jesus, that you do that today, that you think about that God has created an opportunity for you to come and meet with him and to trust him and to experience him. And we need to share that as well. And that's our mission. That's where we can find hope. That's where we can find purpose in these really scary times.
Thanks for listening to the Carrickfergus Vineyard podcast. If you'd like to find out more about our church, please visit our website at carrickfergusvineyard.org.